Welcome, everybody. Just a quick introduction from me, Jason Blake. I'm the Technical Director for the Dome Red Deer, and also the Technical Director for the West Canada Soccer Academy, which is the soccer program of the Dome Red Deer. I want to welcome you to this Player Development Masterclass series. We're really excited to be hosting this. We're doing 5 individual sessions across this week. First one today, which I'll introduce in a second. The key thing for us is that the Dome Red Deer and the West Canada Soccer Academy, we're connecting Central Alberta with experts from the professional game in England across this week, which is one of the things we're really excited about. This really supports the Dome Red Deer's mission to provide a greater emphasis on long-term athletic development in Central Alberta. We have noticed across some of the sports that we coach in the Dome that there's a lot of emphasis on technical and tactical, and maybe the holistic development maybe gets overlooked a little bit through our sports. So this is what we're really trying to promote this week and help specifically to educate the players that join us, but we've also encouraged parents and coaches to join in as well. So just a couple of housekeeping things just before I hand over to our guests. First of all, no one that's joining in today, we don't need to see your video. So if you can keep that switched off. All communication will take part in the chat function. While the discussion is going on between our experts, I'll be monitoring the chat. If any questions are put in the chat during the conversation, I may interject and bring that question into the conversation. All know that once we get to probably about the half hour, 40-minute mark, we're going to open it up to questions and answers that we've seen within the chat during the previous half an hour. So that's the housekeeping bit done. It leaves me, first of all, to introduce our facilitator today, who is Jim Frederickson, easy for me to say. Jim's the Vice President of the Dome Red Deer, and he's also the Head of Strength and Conditioning for the Dome as well. So Jim is going to be facilitating the discussion. And then I'm delighted to welcome a former colleague of mine and a friend, Jennifer Lace. Jennifer is joining us from England. Jennifer is the Head of Sports Psychology and Personal Development for Nottingham Forest Football Club in the Championship. And she's very kindly offered us some time this evening, UK time, to come and give us some insight and knowledge that she has. So Jim, I'm going to hand it over to you, and I will maybe chime in if there's any questions that come in the Q&A. Thanks, Jim. Thanks, Jen.
Thanks, Jason. That's great. Thank you for setting this up, and thank you for your passion for our sport and for the Dome. And we just thank you for connecting us with some professionals that can help give us some guidance and advice in the areas that they're experts in. So we're just thankful for that. Thank you, Jennifer, for taking the time out of your day. I know that you're busy and you've got a lot of demand for your time. So thank you so much for taking this time to help us out and help start this conversation. I think part of the passion of the Dome is really to help athletes develop at multiple levels in multiple different ways. And that's where we kind of call it maybe a holistic health approach or comprehensive approach to athletic development, however you want to say it, or however we are comfortable with saying it. What we know about it is that there's multiple different things that can help develop an athlete at a higher level, and it takes time to do that. So thank you so much for coming on. And I was just trying to think, well, where are we going to start? Because I'm sure you could keep us going all day with such a powerful topic. I mean, we know just how powerful the mind is. And I think when players get a handle on really how much this can help their game, they really start to engage in it. And it sounds too big at first when you first start talking about it. But I think as we start the conversation and as players and parents realize just how important this is to success, I think they can really, get interested and really maybe start to learn some things they can apply. So with that said, I'll fire off a question. I guess maybe some people might be wondering, like, what is good sports psychology? What is it? Can you maybe start with that?
Yeah, so first of all, hi everyone. Thanks for having me on. It is the evening here. So managed to organise the day to get some time with yourselves tonight, which is lovely. In our country, we have lots of different things going on for sports psychology, and I'm pretty sure that you guys do too. I've had a little look at the market over there for sports psych. I think one of the considerations is the way you frame the word, Jim, which is around what is good sports psychology. That our field, and football specifically, is plagued with people who are life coaches, who are executive coaches, motivational speakers, you've got sports psychologists, you've got performance psychologists. You have lots of different terms, and actually in this country specific, that sports psychologist term is a protected title. So the point being is, it's really important to understand who and what is the person that you're dealing with. So what is their main focus? Some practitioners can do a broad range of things, where some can focus really narrow and maybe have a clear focus on one or two different elements, but that's what they're really, really good at. So before anybody works with anybody in the field of psychology or mental skills or performance psychology, it's really probably crucial to find out their background, find out their qualifications, find out their angle, their approach, and then probably really just take it from there. Typically, sports psychology has been seen, and not so much so more, but has been seen as the go-to person when there's a problem. In a really reactive sense, you have to. When I first started working in football at a Premier League club before my club here, a player once said, "I'm not working with Jen because I'm not a psycho." And actually there becomes this stigma attached to working with a sports psychology practitioner, say like myself, where you have to have a problem, or you have to be strange, or you have to be mentally ill to work with somebody in our capacity. And that's an absolute null. What we actually look to do is be proactive and work with athletes on mental skills with a focus on performance. So going back again to the second point of what makes good sports psychology, is it's being proactive about things rather than wait until there's a problem to work with somebody in a sports psychology capacity. And then I think the third consideration for good sports psychology is that it happens at many different levels. So it can happen with player-facing work, so one-to-one for the athlete, where they take control, and the discussions are then around what works for you in performance, what doesn't work for you in performance, how can we change that. Then the second level would be around coaching, and how do coaches then behave, what are the key messages, how do we use language, how do we portray what we're trying to create. And then the third level is probably around culture, environment, organisational goals, even board level at sometimes facilitating your managers or your lead coaches, people in them really key positions to try and again create the best performance climate that you're trying to aim for. So around them three key points really, Jim, would make good sports psychology different from just any type of sports psychology, if that's clear enough.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, you sound insanely smart. So that's the thing that I think when you get somebody with somebody like yourself who has the background that you have, there's just so much more to learn. It expands your awareness of, hey, there is a lot of room to improve. There is a lot of different ways we can look at things. There's so many different ways we can improve, right? So even where you're coming, even the culture, who would have thought about that, like in terms of, your position, but really, it really is important to tie it all together and get everybody kind of on the same page. So no, that's exciting, and thank you for explaining that so well. I guess the other thing I was kind of thinking about is, if I'm a young athlete and I'm thinking about, that's hard to digest, a lot of that, because it's like I said, you sound very knowledgeable and everything else. How could we maybe relate it to a young player who's going, okay, how can I take sport? How can I apply this principle or this field to my sport? How can I understand that maybe at the basic level to kind of, sink my teeth into it?
Absolutely. So one of the first things, I'll tell everybody on here is I am quite new into a role at a championship club now, where I'm head of department. So we're writing lots of different programs for players from 23 years old, making their debut against some of the big Premier League teams in cup games, to our under 8 or 7 year olds, and that looks massively different right across the ages. But probably for a youth development athlete, we would look at just the basics of mental skills and equipping our athletes with A, the education around what mental skills are, and then B, being able to apply them in a sporting context, so in a game or in training. So some of the basic mental skills that we would kind of look to ensure everybody and our athletes are comfortable with are around the lines of motivation, goal setting. We take that really for granted. We think we've nailed it, and then we look at some of our goal setting and they're still so outcome focused rather than focusing on the process and real mini baby steps in some cases. We've got other mental skills such as concentration, decision making, so that is in game, on the ball, the real fast firing decision making skills in there. You've got other things around confidence, emotional regulation, so that, you know, when that challenge happens in a game or you don't get the decision and that redness sets in, and then you want to go off and make a bad tackle or shout at the referee. And parents are the same. We see this happen with parents hugely, and a big part of what we do is working with parents as well, so that's important. But for an athlete, it is almost writing a list of these mental skills and ticking the box to say I'm aware of them and I implement them in this way. Or actually, I don't know anything about this one. How can I then go and have a discussion around it and implement it into my game? And into training as well, because very, very similar to your physical skill, you know, a lot of your psychology should be done during the week, and then it just happens automatically on a game day or a performance day. We wouldn't really try anything new, or we wouldn't expect you to be doing anything different or much different on a game day than we would in training. So just similar to a physical skill, yeah, looking at them mental skills. And we probably would expect them mental skills to take probably around from a 7-year-old, around that under 8, to around a 17-year-old or an under 16, under 17-year-old. We would expect that long to be educated and be quite confident in implementing these mental skills. And then just a little step up from there, it changes slightly, because the guys who are then playing at what in our country at professional level, and they do make their debuts early, they don't get to that top level without being able to do them basic mental skills. A lot of them are already really fluid on their visualization. They're fluid on why they should be visualizing. They're great on their goal setting. They take the ownership and they're setting their own goals. They have nailed their pre-game routines. They do their imagery, or, you know, even what their pre-game routine looks like, they do that on their own and they really take ownership. So the challenge for us as psychology practitioners then looks different. And it comes a little bit broader, where you're talking a bit more around self-awareness. It comes around being able to really focus when we need to, being able to compartmentalize day-to-day challenges then, because they become adults where they then get families and houses and so on. So it becomes more about identity and who they are at that real top level. But I have yet to meet an athlete who is at the top level who isn't doing, you know, the list of mental skills already.
Oh, wow. Well, that's amazing. And, you know, I can say, you know, with the athletes I've worked with, that's true too. You know, you can really see that. And I think this is where it's so important to have that leadership that you bring in terms of the awareness level of these kids understanding at a young age. You know, these are some of the things that I can focus on that helps control nerves. I know Noah, Dome CEO, was just thought we had a little chat just a little bit about sometimes in his games, you know, where he'd be nervous, and sometimes that would affect his performance, sometimes it wouldn't. But just having a routine and you know, being able to, you know, get the distractions out and focus on what it is he is. It's a discipline, right? And you get that down. But yeah, that's really neat. Thank you.
Jim, can I just jump in there?
Yeah, absolutely.
Just a question posed to me from the chat room there is one about nerves prior to performance. And you were mentioning there about routine. I don't know if that connects. Maybe Jim, Jen, you could just talk about kind of pre-performance nerves and where that fits, how that kind of, you know, how that works for young athletes.
Jen, you go ahead first and I'll jump in.
Yeah, so this is absolutely on our list of mental skills, is that emotional regulation. That's where your nerves fall under, is kind of that title. So one, I just want to tell you that that's where it falls under, so that whoever's asked that, when we've all gone off this call, you can kind of type that into Google, or in the UK, we have a great website. It's nothing to do with me. I don't have any stake in it, so it's not a sales plug, but it's great for athletes, and it's lots of free resources, called Believe Perform. So it's just believeperform.com. They've got loads of stuff on there. So you know, if that is you asking that question or that applies to you, please feel free to go broader than this chat and find it, you know, have a little look for yourself. But absolutely right, Jace, what we would say is we need to capture them key thoughts and key triggers that are making you feel nervous in a weekly session or at a time when you're not feeling nervous. And you really have to think about, okay, what were the key messages that were going through your mind at them times, and write them down. And we would talk about capturing them thoughts. And then once we've captured them and identified them, we can then work on we check and challenge. So we see if they're true. And actually, a lot of the time, if we are nervous and we perceive it as negative, the key messages that we're just feeding our brain actually aren't very true. So we tend to, before a game, we act quite emotionally. And this is where, again, you can look onto Google about different types of the brain, but we have a tendency to act emotionally or based on our emotions. And then we have another part of the brain which is based on logic and facts and the truth, and that's more of our rational side of the brain. And actually we try to teach our athletes, and whoever's asked the question, please, you know, feel free to Google it or contact me after if you want a little bit more on this. But working with them two parts of the brain, write a little list. What are them negative thoughts? What are the thoughts that are making you feel really nervous? And you're almost making a plan to combat them thoughts. And then you're almost checking, are they true? Because you'll probably find if they are them emotional based thoughts, the answer's maybe not. You know, okay, what might be one? What if I don't make that pass? Or what if I don't score? Okay, well, what if you don't score? Your mum and dad might disown me, or my teammates are going to shout at me. Actually, how true is that? I'm sure mum and dad will still love you, and you know, I'm sure your teammates have made mistakes, and I'm sure your coach won't drop you from the team. So often then that emotional thought that's making you feel nervous isn't very true or isn't valid. So we look then to rewrite that with a more positive performance script, that we will call them for simplicity, which is then a set of positive scripts or positive statements that we shall feed ourselves instead of the negative. Now, a really interesting fact, and it's not it's not limited to its critiques, but we are led to believe by some of the research that our brain can actually only think one thing at one time. It can flick really fast, but actually at one time it can only think one thing. So you've got a choice then to decide. And this is the other thing about your emotions, it's to recognize that you have emotions, but they are your choice. You have thoughts, but they are your choice. You don't have to be hung by them, and you don't have to act by them. So it's great that you've asked the question, whoever has asked, because that's great that you're able to recognize I am feeling nervous. Typically, younger children really struggle to label their emotions and recognize what's going on. And I'm not being stereotypical, but our research says that males struggle with it even more. So it's great whoever's asked that question that you can label that. So that's one thing you'd look at, is rewriting that. You create what we will call a positive performance script. Now the idea is to go through that script every time you put your boots on. Don't wait till you really, really feel them nerves and expect your brain to be able to feed and tell yourself the positive performance script, because the emotional side will be too strong. It's almost like you wouldn't you wouldn't say you've never taken a penalty before ever. You wouldn't expect yourself to be able just to do a successful, perfect penalty in a game when it's needed for the first time. That's too much pressure, and you haven't learned the skill. And it's exactly the same for your psychological and your mental skills. Practice it when you don't really need it, so that when it comes to that pre-game or the night before or whenever the nerves kick in, you're already good at the skill of managing the emotions. You can already go through your positive script rather than your emotional side of the brain hijacking you and being really strong away from your positive performance script. Yeah. Don't know if that's a really long answer to what seemed a little question.
No, that's awesome. Thank you. And just to piggyback on that, you know, I've had the opportunity to work with a downhill ski coach, alpine coach. He's had gold medals in the Olympics. He's very, very accomplished, older man. Working with him in a different sport altogether, and I had an opportunity to work with him alongside for about 2.5 years, almost 3 years. And exactly what you're saying is one of the things that was most brilliant about this man that I learned, the way he coached his athletes, was he had two athletes that were, one of them was the top motocross racer in the world at a young age. I think he was about 14 when I started working with him. And there's one race a year that they race called the Loretta Lynn's Amateur National in the States. And it's really their whole season depends on one race. And this kid had broke his collarbone right before the race, 4 weeks before. So basically you're done. But we managed to rehab him, had him at the race, and his own team had told him that he wasn't going to be the top guy. And anyways, the point is that the father had taught his son over the years leading up to that regardless of what the media says, your team says, your team manager says, what happens during the race, everything that goes on in a competition, whether it be whatever the sport is, that you focus on the task and you focus on what you're there to do. And that's where you said you have the choice. You have the choice to be distracted by something or someone. Say the referee makes a bad call or whatever it is, you have the choice to shift your energy towards something you can't control, or you can have the discipline to focus more on the game. And that's where you've got your gamers or the guys that are known to be able to clutch players or whatever it is you want to call it. But it really is that discipline. And he taught his son that all the time, regardless of what's going on, regardless of the circumstances on the outside. He had trained this kid so well to focus that he had ended up winning 2 national championships that year at that race, 2 the next year, and then signed a factory deal and was the top U.S. pro national guy in the up and coming, so the rookie of the year. And it was just, I could see it. The kid was just so solid mentally. So I have a huge respect for what you do and the importance of training kids on that at a young age. I think it really is what develops elite athletes at the end of the day.
Yeah, and absolutely. Another key point is how we feel comes down to how we interpret that feeling. So if I put to you the idea in a really generic example of 2 players both making a step up in a team older than them or than their normal training team, if that makes sense. And it's the same scenario where, you know, you've got parents, it might be the end of a season game where it is important, they don't really know the players, and actually one person can feel that anxious feeling in their stomach and they feel a little bit sick and it's game day, so we wake up in a little bit more of an excited or jittery mood, and straight away that turns into, oh my god, what am I feeling, why am I feeling like this, do I speak about it, is this normal, oh god, my game's not going to go great. And actually we talk ourselves then into a downward spiral because we've interpreted that feeling as a negative anxiety or a negative nervous state. Now you speak to some athletes at the top level, and we're talking professional level, and these are the guys who, you know, they go 1-0 down in a massive game, or what another one that baffles me is people in a defending position where your job is to keep that ball out the net, and if you're on the last row, that's your job. Do you feel scared when that happens? Do you feel nervous? And actually they say, no, I love it. And they really interpret that. It's not saying that they don't get them feelings. Most of them do wake up on game day and they're awake early and they do have the flutters in their tummy and they are a little bit more jittery and the heart might be racing a little bit more, but actually the interpretation is that they're excited. This is because we care. This is what we're training for all week. And it's really that interpretation of how you it's really how you interpret a situation. So it's not saying them feelings are negative, but it's just them reframing it to explain it's a really positive, this shows you care, this shows this is what you're about, rather than letting them then control you. Like you were saying with that young athlete, he seems to be able to have been able to recognise and really stand up when you get them feelings and say, okay, I am feeling this. Because another big thing we would say to all of our players is not to deny them feelings, because trying to pretend that you're not feeling anything and you've got it all under control and you're really cool and nobody has a negative thought, actually that makes it worse. So you're almost putting a lid on it. Now, you wouldn't do that with a physical injury. If you had a sore knee or a sore hamstring or a sore shoulder, you would tell your coach, or you'd tell your mum and dad or your parents, whoever looks after you. So if you've got a worry or if you've got a thought or a question, a lot of people keep that in. And actually what we really, I work through the coaches to do it at our club, and on an athlete one-to-one, what we really want you guys to do is to speak up and to say, I'm thinking this, or actually this is how I'm feeling. And purely by expressing it, you're already helping yourself make sense of it to then interpret it in a more positive way. A couple more points to consider. Yeah.
Great.
Can I just jump in with a couple of bits there? A couple of questions have come in there just to mention about, are there simple techniques to get out of your head before the game? So if you're a young player and those nerves are that self-talk, those negative conversations in your head are happening, is there a simple way, whether that's individually on your own as a young soccer player or with help from a coach or a parent, are there simple techniques that can help alleviate that negative self-talk and those nerves?
Yeah, so just going back to the point I made before about the brain can only think one thing at one time. It can flick so fast, but actually at one time it can only think one thing. So you've definitely got your performance script. So I would suggest to all of us to, at a time not on a game, so in a training day or just at home in the evening, create a solid self-talk script which just consists of 3 or 4 positive statements that you want to say to yourself. Now you can work backwards, and when you have got that kind of the negative self-talk going on before a game, you can start with that and write down what goes through your brain regularly, and then write your positive self-script off the combating them key statements, if that makes sense. The other one we've got is visualization, is a really good one, but again should be done every time you do a physical warm-up. You should be doing your psych skills, because then when you really need it in that emotional time, like you're saying, before a game, it becomes easier. So around the visualization, the reason why we'd suggest doing this one is the brain can't detect between reality and just a thought. So without getting too technical too early, if you visualize yourself in a situation and you visualize it positively, so how you want it to go, you're giving your brain something to focus on to stop again the negative thoughts coming in. And it also it sends the transmitters, sends the neurons, the information down the neurons in your brain to thinking that it's already been here before, so that when you need to be positive or when you need to execute something in a game, the information goes faster and you're more likely to do it. So if you think about it almost like footprints in the sand. So if you're doing your visualization and you're creating your positive self-talk script, then when you really need it, your brain thinks, I've already been here before, because there's already footprints in the sand. So it finds its way easier to be able to control your emotions, to be able to be more positive in your brain, to be able to execute the skill, whatever the skill it is that you're trying to do well in your game, or the run that you're trying to make, or the decision that you're trying to make a little bit quicker. And then also one that we really overlook, but surrounding yourself with the right people on a game day can really help. If you're the type of athlete that likes to be on their own, because there's some people like that, then you've got your music. And there's loads of Olympic athletes. Michael Phelps is a huge one. You'll see him with his music. A lot of the Olympic athletes, the swimmers especially, you can see it, they have a bit of a hold. And it's the space before they step up to their kind of stand to start their race. So quite often you see the athletes in there with their headphones in, and some of them you can see have got really fast stuff going on, again just to distract the brain. Some of them have got maybe some more chilled stuff, so that could be another good one for you as a young athlete, recognizing what type of music helps you feel before a game. Then that final one I was just about to say about connecting with good people. Some people like to be around other people to help again distract the brain, and chatting to people, chatting to your teammate, to your mum and dad, to whoever drops you off, your grandma or your granddad, to your coaches, anybody you can. What you're looking for really is to distract that negative self-talk in obviously a controlled way. So there could be a couple of practical strategies. Hope that answers whoever asked that question.
Really good. And just from my part, I assume consistency is really important, not just doing it when you feel you need it, but doing it regularly, I would assume.
Yeah, if you leave it to when you need it, you've left it too late. And it comes down to that penalty example I've just given you. if, you know, for example, we all know I'm not a soccer person, don't really know the game, never kicked a ball. So you wouldn't expect to take a winning penalty in a game when it actually matters and give it to me to do and expect me to be able to perform it correctly because I've never practiced it. And it's exactly the same with your mental skills, whereby you can't expect your brain to perform when you need it to if you haven't practiced in them training settings.
That was good.
I think he's stuck, isn't he?
Yeah, that last comment was so helpful, I think. You know, just that brought it home for me personally. Just, you know, if you have practiced for that, you know, that one opportunity, and then you expect, you know, mentally to perform, so many people can't perform for that probably that exact reason right there. They just haven't trained themselves to, you know, maybe from a skill level, yes, but not from a pressure standpoint, you know, because it's usually when the game's big and important, or it's a playoff game, or it's a, you know, tie game. That's when it changes everything, right? So.
Absolutely, yeah. We tend, when we are under pressure as well, to revert to what's safe, because that's how we're hardwired as human beings. You know, we do have that instinctive part of us that goes, what do I need to do just to survive? And the pressure, or the heighten the perceived threat, the less executive and the less extensive things that we start to be able to do. So definitely when we need it under pressure, our brain's not thinking about how we can start visualizing and self-talking at the same time. It's thinking, what am I good at and what is accessible to me to get through this right now? So yeah, the more you can make something a habit, the easier it's going to be under them pressured situations.
Yeah, great. Hey, I think last question here, unless Jason, if you want to jump in with one after this. I think the one thing that I've noticed with youth sports, and not only with youth sports, but just sport in general, but is there any suggestions you could give to parents in order to help them support? I know lots of parents are trying to support their children, but sometimes it comes off the wrong way. And then sometimes I've even seen it where the child won't perform because the parent's there and they're maybe afraid of, you know, the reaction of the parent if they don't perform. So is there any practical advice you could give parents to support their children in, you know, a healthy environment and helping them to perform higher?
Yes, there's loads, and some of it's quite controversial because we run the risk of parents thinking we're telling them how to parent, and that's absolutely not. But we also have to understand that being a parent of a performance athlete is also really, really difficult. So some practical considerations: one, to understand the journey of an athlete. And I know Canadian soccer is not the same yet to where the UK is, but is long. Nowadays it is long. So a child when they sign a contract, their first professional contract around 16, if that's what they're aiming to do, has often had already a mini professional career of 10 years from when they were 7 or 6 or 7, going to an academy setup like you're building in with yourselves 3-4 nights a week. So that limits their other sports, that limits them taking advantage of playing in the street and so on. They're often exposed to physical programs early on. They're thinking about not eating snacks early on because that might not be great for you as an athlete. So actually we really have to consider the bigger picture and think, we don't want to be putting too much pressure on these children for all of them years potentially before they even get anywhere near a professional contract. So in our country it is turning where we're looking at, they are children first. We're looking at how do they learn. We're looking at, when we talk about introducing mental skills to our younger groups, that is as simple as emotional awareness. It's as simple as them being able to label feelings. It's as simple as them being able to talk about having a bad day, recognizing who's in their corner, recognizing we have this thing where we talk about who's on your bench, and we're literally getting children to think about who is around them to support them. We have a huge focus on it's got to be fun. we can't treat them like mini professionals because the journey is so long. And especially from a psychological point of view, if what we'd like them to do is to enjoy it, and the reason why is because if we enjoy something, then we become more intrinsically motivated to do it. And if somebody's intrinsically motivated towards something, they will do it for longer and they will do it more anyway. So I think we bombard them in some areas so much. We pick them up from school and then we bring them to training and they eat in the car at some point, and it becomes so intense that actually, and everyone's trying to do the right thing. Nobody's deliberately waking up thinking, oh, I'm really going to work these kids to the bone and they have to play football, and that's it. And it comes from a real negative intent. Nobody does that, I don't think. But by nature of us all wanting, I want the best psychological departments, the fitness guys want the best fitness departments, the coaches want 400 hours on the grass because they want the best departments. And actually we lose sight of trying to keep it fun, trying to keep it creative, doing different sports, because we want the kids to be happy, because then they're more likely then to play, take the ball outside even when they get home, because they love it. And that's where their extra hours are coming in, rather than it being routine and boring and forced, because that's when we really enter that zone of burnout around 14, where they hate the game and then they don't want to play. And then you could offer them the best professional contract and just the motivation's not there. So yeah, there's a real focus on keeping it fun is one. Consider your language. Obviously, it can be really conflicting for younger athletes, where they're getting one message from the coach and then mum coach or dad coach says another message. A third thing is to understand that there is so much going on in a game for a young athlete. They haven't got the mental capacity to be able to focus on what's going on in the game in front of them, as well as where are their teammates making runs. Oh, and actually my opposition are creeping in to this third here, as well as what's the coach doing, and then key messages or different messages again from, am I pleasing mum and dad? So again, saying nothing at a game is probably the most powerful thing as a parent you can do. There's other considerations, and actually there's quite, again, Believe Perform, that website, there's other websites in the UK, but there is quite a lot of stuff around talking to your child after a game, because that can be difficult. Probably a key thing to help all of these scenarios, i.e. driving to a game or going to training, where'd you go after a bad game when they've lost and they really don't want to speak, is that children are more likely to open up when you don't have eye contact with them. So times like in the car or going for a walk are really key times when your children will open up to you, because they're not sitting face to face and they're not having that eye contact. Another really key skill in talking to younger people as well is in third person. So get them to talk about a hypothetical situation or a hypothetical person. So for example, if you asked your child, if Jack is an under 10 footballer, how would Jack feel after he lost the game? The child will then you will get more honest discussions through a third person in an almost storytelling way, rather than saying, how do you feel when you've lost the game? So they're just kind of key, pre-game training. The question is so big for parents. I don't want to go on waffling for another half an hour about it, but just having that awareness around the third person and the key times, the lack of eye contact, and probably be comfortable with the silence is the last one. Just children will say, don't know, don't want to answer, and they won't be sure, but don't be scared to hold in on the silence and revisit the conversation, because there is an awful lot going on in their little brains. So yeah, as a parent, don't fill it, just let them speak.
Awesome. Jason?
Yeah, I got to say, I found that really interesting. I think when you go on many different courses and you learn about communication, eye contact gets drummed into you. And now listening to that, it really makes sense that probably eye contact with children could be quite threatening and could put a lot of pressure on them. So yeah, that's an interesting one for me here. There's a few questions in the chat, so I'm just going to throw them across. Jennifer just says, do you have any recommended resources or advice for players new to the concept of sports psychology and mental skills? it might help bridge the gap from reactive to proactive, or even for parents. Jen, I've already put your Believe Perform link up on the chat, but if you've got any others that you may want me to add on, I can do that as well.
Yeah, it depends what age your athlete's at, but there is a really good book called Understanding the Teenage Brain. That could be another, as for parents, that could be another one to help understanding the creatures that you are trying to support. We have a UK-based one, and they're probably all going to be UK-based, so I do apologise, but we have another one called the Youth Sport Trust, and they have a whole section on performance parenting. And if you put, it's a website, sorry, yeah, it's a website, and it's heavily criticised, but I do like it, and it gives us a currency to speak to athletes around emotional control and around reactions and around decision making. But The Chimp Paradox for a Parent is a great book to read. You can get it as an audio book if that's your preferred methods of learning, or you can get it as a physical book. And it is a really good, you don't have to read it all either to get some key points from it, but definitely The Chimp Paradox would be up there for emotional regulation and decision making.
I think, just adding from my part as a coach that read the Chimp Paradox, Dr. Steve Peters, is that right? Yeah. It was written in a way, the terminology was very easy to understand when you speak about the chimp and the computer. So it's not a book full of scientific academic terminology that is really confusing. It's actually written in a really reader-friendly way. So I can vouch for the benefit of that book.
It's actually the same with that. The Teenage Brain book is written in really short chapters, but they're not consecutive. So you could read one chapter and then move, not touch it for a week and then read another chapter. And also it's actually written in a tone aimed at parents and teenagers. So I think if you're around 13, 14 plus, your child can also read it as well.
Awesome.
It's a good read, yeah.
Really good. Next one's going to come from a coaching perspective. So this is from Keenan. What age should children be aware of these mental skills? Do we introduce early, or additionally, is every child different? Should it be done on an individual basis?
I think you can introduce it at any age, but it would really go back to our key message of not to overload. The last thing a child needs is school, football, technical, tactical stuff, physical overload, and then we bombard loads with psych. So, but then I am a big advocate for having a small framework. So what is important? So things like with children, we try to teach them the transferable skills. So managing a bad day in school into football, because actually if they can manage that, then when they're a little bit older, they get even better at it, and things get more stressful then when they're even older, and then they might start obviously having, I don't know, if some of them do other jobs and then they go to football, or they then have families and then they go on to be an athlete. So that management and that transition is a really key one. So really the earlier the better, but without drumming it down their throat, so we do some really basic activities around, we describe an emotion and get them to, like emotion bingo as such, and get them just to say which emotion we're describing. So we're not exactly sitting them down in a classroom saying, well, we wouldn't do it, they're too young in a classroom based setting, but we wouldn't sit and say, right guys, today we're going to talk about emotional control, and this is the reason why. It's really about making it fun, it's about making it engaging, and it would all probably be through the coaches rather than on an athlete one-to-one. So I think in maybe my last 4 years I've only done 2 player one-to-ones with younger athletes, kind of 10-year-olds, for multiple different reasons. And one, I'm not a child psychologist, so that's not my speciality. 2, at that age, often they don't have the level of self-awareness to understand or articulate, so it becomes a real cloudy area to navigate on a one-to-one. And you've then got parents to consider. So as a coach, absolutely put it in your sessions, but I wouldn't enforce it on a one-to-one for especially what we would call a foundation level. So that really 8 to 12 individually, we look at through your coaching sessions, how are you doing it, how can you make it fun, how can you dress it up a little bit, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Would it maybe help for any coaches here that might be just thinking about sports psychology and mental training to maybe, and I'm not saying you have to be an advocate of it, but is it the 5 C's with the English FA? Would that be a good bit for coaches?
Yeah, you could go down the 5 C's route. So you've got key pillars, and again, it's a different framework. There's a book on 5 C's actually, and it is good, and it gives you some practical drills to manipulate sessions in terms of commitment. God, you're going to test me now. Commitment, confidence, concentration, communication. What's the last one? What have I missed? Yeah, get the book for the 5th one. I did have it. It's not a model that I use regularly, but yeah, it's that framework. Again, you know, we're talking about what would we give youth athletes. Actually, something is better than nothing. Don't try and throw everything at them, because then you end up having no impact on a big range of things. Just pick 2 or 3. You probably do it anyway, and this is where good sports psychology comes into coaching practice and making people self-aware. As a coach, whoever asks that question, you're probably already getting them to think about scenarios in a session or in a game. That is, in short form, small visualization. So really play on it and really layer it up and have fun with it, and say, you know, you go 1-0 down and it's the World Cup final, and get them, what can you see, what might you be able to hear, what can you smell, and really get them to enjoy the moment. So you can embed it in your session in so many different ways. 5 C's is there. We are looking at my club, we are looking at how do we manage the transitions is a good one. How do they get clarity on what makes them happy? Because as football gets tougher in our country, which it does, and we're quite a saturated market, we would like them to know what makes them happy, so that when they are stressed with school or when they are stressed with football, we like them to have the good skills and be equipped to know, you know, how, it sounds so cliche, but actually what their go back to's to support all the stress, you know, who are on the network. So that's the angle we've gone with mental skills and psychology in our younger age groups.
Awesome. There's maybe 2 or 3 quick questions left in the chat, but I'm going to try and amalgamate them into one kind of question. So it revolves around kind of can we train to have a better mindset, and can we do that outside of the season as well, rather than just during training and the active season? Can we do it outside of the season and away from the sport, at home and in personal time?
Yeah, so one of the key benefits of sports psychology is that you can do it away from training, and actually you can be doing more than you could do physically. So the idea is, if you were to work yourself in a session, in a football session, after maybe 90-minute session, you're physically tired because your muscles are tired. You are depleted, so you do need that rest. No, it's not saying you don't need psychological rest, but actually your brain can go for a lot longer. Now, I'll quickly show you something, and just tell me if you can't see this, but I'll quickly just share this with everybody. Can you see this?
Yeah, we got it.
Yeah, so basically, if you look here, and if you're looking at the screen, it's on the left. This is a neuron in our brain, and you've got 2 axons at either end, and this blue light coming down is the information traveling through the neuron. Now, on the right-hand side, see, you've got exactly the same, but now you've almost got these little sausage rolls around the neuron in the middle, and the blue light is traveling significantly faster. Now, this is actually why we would say to do sports psychology, away, you do your visualization, you do your goal setting, you do your self-talk as much as you possibly can, and you've really, really visualized the skills that you're trying to do, because these little sausage rolls actually represent a chemical. And you can go away and have a little research around this, anybody who's really into their neuroscience, but this chemical is called myelin. And some clubs have or promote what we call a myelin gym. And what it does is it helps our brains conduct information faster. So it helps us learn faster, learns physical skills faster, learns situations or scenarios, and enables us to make the right decision faster next time. So the more you can think about things the more of this myelin, the more of this kind of, it's a conductor. It's a conductor around the neuron, but we call it like a sausage roll. And the more, you know, the more you can build up in your brain of this before you get tired. And this, being able to visualize without getting tired, actually outlasts you, what you can do physically with your muscles. So it's so important that you are doing these skills and you're just thinking about your game, probably maybe like half an hour after a session. So you do 90 minutes physical football where you're doing your session and you're focusing on what the coaches are saying. And then you've probably got another half an hour or so to spend in what we would call the myelin gym. And it's visualizing them scenarios, it's going over them again, it's creating that chemical conductor in your brain. And that will speed up the information processing. And then obviously you still need your rest, and which is why we say have a break from football at key times, because you don't want to burn out ultimately. So yeah, huge advocate for doing sports psych and creating that myelin as much as we can.
And that myelin exercise there, you said about doing it immediately or within kind of an hour or so after training. Can that be done in an off-season period as well during a break?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it is healthy to take off the athlete t-shirt, and it is healthy to have a separate identity that, you know, you're into cricket and it's the cricket season, or you're into a different sport. But yeah, you can still do an hour a day on your football, even if physically you're still giving your body a break, or it is off season and you're not getting any tactical knowledge. Absolutely, yeah.
Perfect. Jen, we're just over the 50-minute mark, so I'm going to wrap it up now. What I will say to anyone that's watching, if you would like any of those links, or if you've got any questions for Jen, we're going to field them through the Dome email address. So that's info@thedomereddeer.com. I'll add it in the chat in a second. But if you've got any kind of further requests or questions you might want to throw at Jen post this Zoom call today, you can get it through that email address, and I'll post it on there in a minute. I'm actually going to introduce Noah Welsh, the president of the Dome, just to come in and add a kind of final brief to this chat, and he will conclude our meeting. So Noah, I'm going to hand it over to you if you want to jump in. Come on, Noah.
He's on mute. Does he know he's on mute?
Hopefully he knows now.
You guys hear me?
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, Alana has the master mute button going on in the video button. But anyways, Jen, thank you so much for taking the time to do this. We're really, really appreciative of that.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Jim, thank you too. And Jason, obviously, this has been your idea. So we have 4 more days of this, which is really, really fun. I think for our listeners, especially those who are in the central Alberta region, we do 2 main things at the Dome, but one in particular is our bread and butter and what we're passionate about, and that's athletic development over a long period of time. And there's a lot that goes into it, and by no means do we at the Dome feel like we have that figured out completely, and that's why we love learning from people like Jen. But there is a lot that goes into it, and it's something that we're passionate about, and we got a good team here that this is what we want to do. And a lot of the stuff that we're hearing now and what Jen was saying transfers over to other aspects in life. And so we look at the child, and if they can go on and play in the English Premier League in soccer, that's great, but they're going to use a lot of these skill sets in athletic development in the working space. And as a former athlete that's now trying to run a business here, there's so much of this that transfers over. So again, Jen, thanks so much for this. And for those people that are listening, as Jason said, we will have this recording, but this is what we're super passionate about at the Dome, and something that I think sets us apart from others in the space. So thanks so much, Jen.
Thank you.